Hello all, my name is Hugo Bayer. I am a texture artist at Radiodon Studios. And even though we didn't use Substance Designer for our game The Order 1886, I would like to show you my own personal view of procedural textures. I started in the game industry about 10 years ago, and only 4 months from now, recently, I started playing with Substance Designer, and I have been loving to do procedural texturing. So I have this letter that I created in about 2 hours, and I would like to show you how I achieved this, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's start by showing you this graph. I think the graph is not big at all. I think it's pretty small compared to other materials I did before. So I don't want to scare you when you're doing materials from scratch on Substance Designer. That's kind of considered as small as you can get. So, but you will get used to it. I would like to start by using the crystal one, which you can find in the noise generators. And I'm getting a pearly noise over here on the bottom, and I'm just getting a little bit of warping. It can be a directional warp or just a warp by itself. I just did directional warping because I wanted to have the vertical warping on my curvature. And then I'm using edge detect, which by whatever the name says, it detects the edging of whatever you have on your surface or your slopiness from the directional warp. The edge detect, be aware that I'm using 4096 by 4096. If you have your graph being smaller, like 1024 by 1024, you won't be able to get the same result on the edge detect. So it will just look like this, and you don't want that. You need a higher resolution for the edge detect to happen. So I'm using 496 or 496. You can always decrease your resolution after the fact. Again, I'm doing a safe transform, which I'm tiling by twice, right? And then you can see the number 2 over here. And then I'm using a blur after the levels, of course, because the levels are just giving me the sharpened result of the lines. So I'm using a blur, and I combine the blur with multiply on top of each other, just to get me that little bit of sharpening and blurriness edge surrounding the flakes. Then I go to a blend, I mean a bevel, which give me this slope result coming from these black spots. This bevel node is actually a new node in Substance Designer 5. So if you have Substance Designer 4.6, you might not be able to do the same effect, or you're gonna have to do a lot of steps to do this. I'm not sure exactly how to do it, to be honest. With the bevel node, I go to slope blur grayscale, and a lot of other tutorials, people already talked about this slope blur grayscale, and I believe it's one of the most powerful nodes for me, and it can do a lot. I like using in different methods. This method which I use is I get and use the same image in both of them, and because I have the white to black over here on the slope, what it does is it pushes the white and to the black as much as possible. That's what the slope does, slope blur at least. And you can have using it with max mode, because max mode will just max each pixel in between the blending of the others. So it pretty much is like the lighten from Photoshop. Let's talk about the samples of the slope blur. I always use 32. There's no doubt you want to do that. I don't know why they actually have this here. I believe the fact that it just gives you better results with being 32. And I never use intensity as a lot of intensity on it unless you have a really large broad space of blurriness. Okay, so in the next step I used again the same node, slope blur grayscale, but now with a mask. Okay, so let's see what I use for the mask. I use a Clouds 3, and then I got a mosaic grayscale. Mosaic just creates a little bit of a differentiation on your noise. If you want to make more or less, it kind of gives you that kind of glass look of effect. And then I am connecting that to the slope blur grayscale, which will give me those edges following on the flakes, a little bit more variation and noise. This next step is a little bit harder to understand, but I'll try my best to explain. The non-uniform blur grayscale is another great node for Substance Designer, and it can give you a variation of slopiness. So it gives you a direction slopiness per se. The more you have it, the more it's going to destroy your texture. So be careful of using it. So don't exaggerate values on it. I'm just putting the difference in between the slope blur grayscale and this guy. You can see that it stretches down in the direction that you want. Play around with those numbers and you'll see what it goes. I always use sample 16 and blades 9s to get you better quality. And I'm using the same thing over here, but with a different angle and less intensity. And I blend both of them together with a mask to get you a variation that you want over here. So the difference in between this guy and this guy, it's big because it's giving you variation on the edging, and at the same time it's blurring the edging so you can have a little bit more of that bevel look. This is another trick that I found out where I use the blur high quality grayscale of whatever I have before, and I subtract those guys together. So if you look at this one and that guy, you can see that you're getting those black spots over here, like it's going down on in the middle of the flake, and that it's because you have that blur of the high quality grayscale, and you're going and subtracting right in the middle. So the more blur you put over here, it gives you that sense of result of a little bit more of that negativeness on top of the thing. So I have a value over here. You can play around with the values that you want, but the result is this. So you don't, the flakes are not as lumpy anymore. They're a little bit more flat and varying each one to another. So you can see the result is a little bit different. And then I blend this guy, which is the flakes, with another one that is the wrinkles, which I'm going to explain next. All right, the wrinkles are a little bit more simple to understand, and I hope to explain you as best as I can as well. Let me organize the notes so you can read this better. All right, so what I did was I'm using Crystal 2. You can see I love Crystal nodes. And I'm using a safe transform so I can get the tileable 2x2. I'm using a Perlin noise zoom, and I'm direct warping those guys together to get that different waviness to the whole thing. And then I use an edge detect, which is that mass over here. And I'm using levels so I can get a little bit more of the colors that I want. And on the bevel side, it's super small, but you can see that the lines are kind of getting that wrinkly look of skin. So that's what I'm going for. And again, I experimented a lot with this. It might not even be good enough. You can play around with it more as you want. And on top of that, I'm using the slope blur grayscale on both again, so I can push the whites to black. So the difference, you can see that it's getting there. The pixels of the white are going to the black, and it gets you that really squishy edging, and it gives you that sense of, let me go to the levels here so you can see it. It gives you that sense of skin wrinkly look. And then I blur that guy out. Again, use the slow blur so you can get that nice skin look again. So again, I might not even necessarily need this if I had this guy before, but I did it in any way because I wanted to get those two lines going on and have that being a little bit more thick and not being as big. So you can play around with other nodes to get to the same result maybe. After that, I do an auto levels, so you have a range of pixels that you from 0 to 255, and that is the blend that I have in between the flakes and the wrinkles. Now that we saw that the wrinkles work together with the flakes, you can already connect that to the normal map, and you have a better view of how the surface is happening. you know what's going on. Before I go forward to the color, I'd like to show you in the 3D view how is that working? How is it looking, right? As you can see, you have the flakes and the skin working pretty nice together for that result. So the only problem with the lighting on the Substance Designer, it's a little bit flaky, so you have to find a better angle in the cube so it works best. But you can see the surface looks pretty good, and the way the wrinkles and the lines of the flakes are, the blending between the two are pretty nice. So let's go back to the texture view, and let's talk about albedo. Let's talk about color, how to make the color work for a letter, right? The gradient linear gives you the black to white, and I'm putting a gradient map, which I choose the colors over here. It's gave me that brown to beige look of the letter. And then I'm using the gradient dynamic vertical, since you're using vertical gradients, right? To achieve this result. But I'm connecting that guy. You can see this line over here. I'm connecting through the high map. So that's where I'm getting that gradient coloring. Okay? And then I'm combining those two with a multiply of the ambient occlusion. This ambient occlusion that I have here, right? I'm combining and I'm getting that result of ambient occlusion together. It's not much. It's just very lightly dark. You can actually just, if you want more, you can just push that gradient a little bit more, and you have that little dark splotches on the ambient occlusion on the letter. It then gives me a little bit more variation. I'm putting a noise, a gradient map of different colors, and that grunge I'm using overlay to put that grunge on top of that letter. So you have that green and pink spots everywhere. You can see the difference in between that guy and that guy. It gives me a little bit more variation, that's all. And I'm putting a noise and overlaying that on top. And that's our albedo right there. You can keep going forward with the variation on those guys, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going too far with albedo. I think it's not as important, and a lot of people already know how to work with this. And the next step is roughness. What I'm doing here is I'm inverting the high map and bringing the roughness to be this way. If you don't know how to work with roughness, just use glossiness and just do inverted. But I like to work with roughness, so I'm inverting that guy. Then I do a high pass grayscale, which brings me a little bit more of that. Instead of that broadness of variation, I'm sharpening the variation, so you don't see as much on the tiling part. I'm using a level so I can take those black spotches down and leaving only almost to clamping, right, the values of the color variations over here. And then I bring that the black white spots that I had before, which I'm creating that gradient map. I'm bringing the same to here, so you have the same result and exactly where the color is varying. You're having the same result on the blend over here. If you want to, you can invert those values and put it here as well. I didn't find that necessary, but it might be work for your work later on. And then you have all the results over here on the right. So you have the albedo, you have the normal map, you have the roughness map, and the metallic map. Even though I'm not using metallic for this, of course the letter has no metallicity, which will be dumb if it does. So I'm putting black in any case. So let me connect the roughness to the 3D view really quick so you can see how this works. And you're seeing that the texturing and material is quite done. And you can do a really nice render like I did here before. Putting some saturation and all that stuff will get you this result. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And I hope to have another tutorial or pass of another material soon.